Hello, I'm Dr. Vincent La Placa, and I'm going to do a presentation on the idea of blended learning in teaching and learning and curriculum development as well. Okay, so let's begin then with the aims and objectives of the presentation. My aim is to explain a bit about what blended learning is and the idea around it and why it's becoming so important. I also want to focus upon the benefits for teachers and academics and learners and your organisation as well. There are a variety of benefits to blended learning, which you can explore and you need to be aware of, and also to explore ways of implementing and integrating blended learning into your teaching, your learning and your curriculum development, but also in interaction with learners as well. So let's begin with what blended learning is. Uh, Blended learning is something which is becoming increasingly important, and it's something that we need to be aware of in our general day-to-day thinking about, for example, curriculum development, how we're going to interact with students and how we are going to design programs and modules as well. So blended learning, and some people refer to it as hybrid learning. You'll see hybrid learning as well as you go through some of the literature and you become more familiar with blended learning. This is a learning model which does as it says, it blends learning models. So blended learning is a model which combines more formal traditional classroom based study, learning and interaction with students and less traditional interaction and teaching. For example, online teaching, online modules, online methodologies and technologies, and you integrate that into the curriculum. So that's where the hybrid blended concepts derives from. Blended or hybrid. You are blending non-traditional and traditional models of learning and teaching within the curriculum. It's often used to enable learners to exercise more choice in terms of engagement with their learning, because you can move between more traditional on-site learning and teaching, but also remote delivery, which encourages more flexibility. So once again, we see the terms blended and hybrid as being associated with traditional and non-traditional methods of learning and teaching. It's often associated with ideas of widening participation within education, within universities, for example. So this idea that we are able to provide as much learning and teaching for students and individuals as much as we can, we widen that, we increase the chances of participation, and as a result we offer more equal access to education, particularly by those students who did not traditionally participate in learning and higher education, for example. So the concept of widening participation is very important here. Now, on a theoretical basis, my experience and my reading around the literature on blended learning lends me towards looking at blended learning within a social constructivist theory of education, that the social world develops through interaction and meaning, with culture and with society. Meaning and interpretation, and the way we use meaning and interpretation and interaction within learning is as important as the acquisition of knowledge itself. So learning requires engagement with language, problem solving, concepts, and also technology. It's an interactive, inductive process. So there has to be dialogue between teacher and learning as well, engagement with technology, and this stimulates in interaction new ideas around problem solving and knowledge creation. So education and understanding and learning is around meaning. It's an active process, and we can encourage that active process, I think, by the use of both traditional models of learning but also less traditional, for example, online learning. So again, social constructivism, and think about this also within a theoretical perspective and how you can use blended and hybrid learning to also develop your views around theory and the theoretical context for implementing different methods of learning and teaching. So let's also think about the context and why is blended learning and hybrid learning becoming so much more important? Well, of course, the first one has to be the global pandemic and COVID-19. More and more people, in fact, millions of people have moved to working at home or learning at home. And the most significant thing which has enhanced this is the more effective use of technology and the more effective use of learning and technology at home. And this has involved the use of more online lectures, more online discussion and more online discussion as we begin working at home more and learning at home more, and less teaching happens in the university or the school or the organisation. And as you know, that's been encouraged and enhanced by the global pandemic, where more and more people are working at home now, and less learning, teaching and working is being done in traditional offices, for example, in traditional school classrooms and universities. The other big thing that we need to think about when we look at the context of blended learning is this move towards more inclusive and diverse curriculums. Education is more effective, student learning is more effective when it is diverse and more inclusive. And blended learning is part of that diverse strategy within education to widen participation and to get more students to come to universities or to register on extracurricular programs and modules. So it's about enhancing and encouraging diversity and inclusivity in our programs, and when we develop our modules and we develop and think about our curriculums and how we can enhance more inclusivity and more diversity. And obviously, by arranging our modules and our programs to be more online, of course, we enable students globally to register on our programs and our modules, and to be able to sit at home and inclusively learn with help from us as instructors, of course. The other big thing that we need to be aware of course, when we look at context, is this idea of the knowledge and skills-based economy. Employers don't just want learners and students to be able to produce excellent essays around theory and research, for example, as important as that is, but they want employees to be able to be effective in the use of technology. So we need to be incorporating the use of technology and learning around technology in our general academic and practical teaching as well, because that's what globally employers want from employees. So this notion of more skills based work within a knowledge and skills based economy is a very important concept, and it's something which we can take account of when we design modules and programs through blended learning, because as you can see, there's this stress on technology and the use of technology within online learning. Okay, there are also different types of blended learning that you will come across in the literature as you become more familiar around blended learning or hybrid learning. And in my experience of designing modules and programs using blended learning, I identify these three as the most important. Although as you read more and you become more familiar, you will be able yourself to identify other modes of blended learning. There is the individual rotation model of blended learning, and this is simply where students rotate and progress through lectures and sessions, and that's either determined by the instructor or the teacher, or a software algorithm that will be integrated into the software design or the learning management system, and that will be able to guide students through learning, for example. There's also what we identify as the flipped classroom model. And this can be simply where students complete online coursework and lectures outside of the classroom so that the instructor can use the class time and the face-to-face time for more guided practice and projects. And this encourages more independent and deeper learning, again by blending traditional and non-traditional modes of teaching and learning. The other one which you're very likely to come across as well is what we call the flex model. And this is where, for example, instructors provide support as needed whenever the student perhaps needs the assistance. And in the meantime, the student simply works fluidly and flexibly through the module and the course content rather independently, calling on the instructor to provide support either online or face-to-face as he or she progresses. So just be aware that there are different modes of blended learning which you'll come across in the literature, but also as you develop your own practical ways of doing blended learning, there's a lot you can take from what's already there within the literature as well. Okay, let's proceed with benefits for teachers and academics. There are a number of benefits of using blended learning for teachers, instructors and academics and people who design curriculums and modules and programs. First of all, in my experience, there are lots of advantages in terms of cost and time efficiency. If you move more and more learning online, that reduces costs. Yeah, obviously being in the classroom enhances costs. If you move to more online blended learning, cost is reduced. Also time, yeah, there is much more time efficiency identified with blended learning. The more you can move online, the better use of your time, for example. Yeah. So if you move assessments online, students don't need to go into the classroom. They don't have to travel long distances. If you set up a system whereby students can present their presentations online together as an individual or even as a group, and that cuts out a lot of unnecessary time. And as I said, it reduces costs. It encourages consistency. Yeah. Information and topics are available to all students, yeah, who are on the module, and not just only to those in the classroom. Learners are consistently linked to lectures and topics on various devices, which ensures equal access in most cases. So again, we're talking about equal access, equality, diversity and inclusivity. And the other good thing, I think from my experience, is that you can analyse learner activities and responses easily, and you can change or optimise content and delivery accordingly. The learning management systems that you can use for blended learning allow you to monitor student progress more effectively. For example, their attendance. Again, for example, who was able to submit their online presentations and their assessments online before the deadline or on the deadline. So there is a lot of opportunity to ensure that students' progress is measured both qualitatively and quantitatively. So there are some benefits to teachers and academics that you might want to come back to as you progress with your knowledge and your experience of blended learning. Benefits for learners is also very important. We are constantly encouraged today to ensure that our curriculums and our modules and our programs deliver high quality benefits for learners. Now, in terms of benefits for learners, first of all, it enhances engagement and peer support, and it enables connections with the learning institution, even when you're off campus or you're not in the classroom. So this encouragement of engagement and peer support, both online and face-to-face, very important to develop learners' abilities and their capacities to integrate with the module and to be able to learn through different types of curriculums. Now, by putting more resources online, students are able to access that material with no constraints, and this can be accessed on smartphones, tablets and desktops that are already used in day-to-day practice. So your modules and your programs become far more accessible, and the benefits of those for students is very effective when they're able to access those through a number of different technologies. Blended learning also encourages self-learning and independent learning. Students might need to search for information online independently if that's what you instruct, rather than just sitting in classrooms relying on the lecturer or relying on the instructor. So there is more encouragement, in my experience, of independent and self-learning. Blended learning also fosters other skills such as soft skills, and that can be time management, critical thinking and team, community cooperation. And we know that those types of soft skills and hard skills are very important to employability skills and learning employability skills. They're the types of skills that employers tend to want to see in students and their employees, and blended learning encourages effectively those skills and the knowledge of employability in that knowledge-based and skills-based economy. So what do you need to think about then before implementing and integrating your blended learning into the curriculum and into your programs and the general management of your modules? Well, first of all, you need to think about the learning management system. So this is the online interactive system that's going to allow you to create, manage and motivate students and manage delivery. And there are a number of different learning management systems that you'll come across or you're probably already aware of. Moodle is one, for example, and there are a plethora of learning management systems. So you need to think about that. You need to think about how you can help your students' abilities. So think about how relevant is your module and your program to employability, and how will integration of blended learning and the learning management system into your curriculum or your program assist students in gaining employability skills. You need to think about the course type here, the aims of your course, the outcomes. It might be that for example, that blended learning is much more effective when you're delivering academic modules which are more academically based than those that perhaps lend themselves to more practice-based ones like nursing or midwifery. So you need to think about the balance between online learning and practical learning. And on many vocational modules and programs, obviously the more face-to-face and being in the classroom is going to be a bit more important. But if you're delivering a purely academic, analytical type module, then perhaps it's the case that blended learning and more online delivery is going to assist students to learn much better. Think about your assessments. Do your assessments lend themselves to blended learning? Or can you change them because of your move to blended learning? So in my experience, moving assessments such as presentations online is a much more effective means of managing online presentations, but it's also a major way of getting students to use technology when they're presenting their presentations, and they're also being marked on those presentations. So when you design your assessments, you can say to students, for example, you know, you are also being assessed on the use of technology. So think about the types of things that blended learning can assist you and your students and your learners with as you become more familiar with it. So I now want to proceed to looking at some issues in implementing and integrating blended learning into your programs and your modules, now that we've looked more specifically at the benefits to learners and to instructors and to the things that you need to think about. So, as I've spoken about previously, the LMS or the learning management system, support system, is very important. You've got to choose an appropriate LMS for your students' needs as well as your needs. So it's important that the LMS suits both of you and that it's attractive to view and it's easy to use. So students can go online, they can see the LMS and it's easy to use. They can see the sections that they need for this week, for example, but they can also see the sections perhaps that they are going to need to upload their online presentations on later on in the module. So it should clearly outline and show where online lectures are and perhaps where assessments are going to be submitted. So these systems allow you to deposit work on them on a week-by-week basis. Section 1 or week 1, section 2 or week 2, and that allows you to logically and conceptually structure your module or your program as you go along. And you need to ensure that you communicate effectively, for example, why you are moving to blended learning and why you are using technology. This needs to be communicated to students as well, and having an effective LMS is going to be very useful for doing that. So you might also need to think about the training requirements of your students and your own requirements in terms of how effective you are at using technology in teaching and learning. So one of the things that you might want to do is instruct students about how to use this, or put on training requirements. But obviously it needs to be clear why you are moving to blended learning and the requirements for using technology for students, once you've also explained the benefits to them as well. You need to create a flexible blended learning strategy. Yep. So you need to test the learning management strategy and system out with students and stakeholders to gain their views and suggestions, as well as gain buy-in from others. You're probably going to want to gain buy-in and support from colleagues and your faculties and organisations, and testing this and effectively communicating how effective blended learning will be part of this strategy. So flexibly use it and communicate it. Yeah, you can include effective assessments in your modules and your programs through this system. So think about which assessments are best done online and which are best done in the classroom, face to face. Will you use quizzes and online presentations as assessments or as mock exams for your students? Will it be better perhaps to have more online assessments but have them at the end when the students have actually completed the majority of their learning and engagement with the blended learning? So think about where, for example, the online assessment should be as you think about and you design your blended learning and you implement that into your modules. So blended learning does enable you to think more effectively, not just about the use of it and the communication of it as a broad tool, but to think about more pedagogically where your assessments perhaps are better linked within the overall learning experience and process. And the other thing that my experience teaches me, and that you'll find in the academic and research literature, is that it is about constructing a blended and integrated learning community. So we're going back to social constructivism and creating communities of learning and communities of interaction. Students and learners should feel a part and be a part of a community of learners, a community of peers that supports learning, technology-assisted learning in an effective way, which increases engagement. And you can do this by simply starting a discussion forum within an LMS, where learners can discuss opinions and ask more questions and communicate more effectively as a team and as a learning community. So you're broadening out the learning environment. You're constructing a learning community which goes beyond just a one model intervention between learners and instructors. And as I've said, in terms of learning management systems and strategies, you can use Panopto or perhaps the Cultura Video Cloud platform for education, for sophisticated and interesting visual and webcast presentations which enhance learning and can also help to construct that more blended, integrated learning community. So again, you're using technology to create a blended and integrated learning environment through hybrid learning. The other thing that my experience teaches me, and I strongly suggest that you have a go at in your teaching and your learning strategies, is evaluate the methods that you're using and evaluate the effectiveness of the technologies and methodologies and learning management systems and strategies that you are applying. As I've said, blended learning automatically collects student data and provides streamlined methods to measure students' progress. So you can use that as part of your evaluation methods as well. By using online technologies, you can use questionnaires and other informal and discursive online discussions, both online and face-to-face. So there are a number of ways that you can use to evaluate your blended learning methods and how effective it is in enhancing learning and teaching, and the progress that it's encouraging in your learners' learning and their ability to progress. On the basis of that evaluation and the conclusions that you come to, you can make further changes to methods and learning management systems and strategies. And if you are being effective, ensure that you disseminate your successes and your ideas to your peers and your colleagues and your faculty and broadly across your organisation. Because once again, we are trying to encourage through blended learning community cross-fertilisation, peer group learning and interaction well beyond the classroom, as I've mentioned before. There are a number of benefits for your peers and your colleagues and your organisation, as I've just stressed. Once you've designed your modules and your programmes through blended learning, and you've perhaps done and conducted some evaluations and you've got some data on the evaluation, hopefully, as I found from my experience, there are numerous benefits that you can, as I've said, communicate across the faculty or the organisation or to your peers. Now, in terms of my own experience, I've been able to communicate benefits of saving time, particularly through systems of less in classroom and in-person learning. I've been able to demonstrate more effective interactions with students via email discussions, forum discussions, or even online chats. I've also been able to say, that I've enhanced the organisation's ability to appeal to more diverse learning styles. So I've been more inclusive, I've been more interactive, and I've encouraged more diversity in terms of different learning and pedagogical styles. I can also say that I've been more purposeful in terms of my face-to-face instruction as well as my online instruction. So I've encouraged deeper learning and I've encouraged my students to think more deeply and more critically, and I've encouraged more increased collaboration among students. And research and evidence shows that students and all learners learn more effectively when there is more increased collaboration and more interaction between those students who are learning together and learning interactively as a collective group. So just to conclude what I've talked about, and just to bring together the presentation lecture around blended and hybrid learning. As I've said, blended learning is becoming increasingly important and teaching and learning. It's becoming increasingly important when you design curriculums and when you think about the broader pedagogy behind your programs and your modules and your use of technologies. And as I've said, the global pandemic and COVID-19 has increased the move towards blended learning. But in terms of the context, we can see once again concepts of diversity, inclusivity, widening participation becoming more and more important in that shift towards blended learning and online teaching, and blending modes of online and traditional and less traditional modes of teaching across the curriculum. So this is something which is going to become increasingly significant, more important, and I think all organisations and people involved in developing education are going to stress the importance of shifting towards blended learning for all its advantages and its increased effectiveness in assisting students and learners to learn. As I said, there are various forms of blended learning which can enhance the learning styles and the learning experiences and processes of learners, and of course you are encouraged to read about that and become familiar with that and integrate that into your blended learning as you creatively develop and integrate this into your curriculums and your programs. And as we've just gone through and reiterated, there are benefits to teachers, learners, and there are benefits that go beyond them to the organisation as a whole, which you can think about when you develop your blended learning and you develop strategies to integrate that into your programs and your modules, but also general curriculum development across your organisation, whether that be a school, whether that be a university, or whether that be a business organisation, because blended learning is becoming an important process both in the private and the public sector as well. And as I've stressed, the key is to clearly think about how blended learning will enhance the overall learning experience. And that includes thinking about how blended learning will enhance and improve the modules that you deliver and the courses that you are responsible for and the programs, and the learning which originates from that, the learning experience. So think about that, think clearly how blended learning is going to enhance the module, the learning styles of the students, etc., and the learning experience overall. And think about how that can be integrated further into your programs, into your degrees, or into your overall academic and pedagogical and business strategies as you develop your blended learning skills and you become more familiar with the concept and the ideas behind blended learning and its effectiveness as a tool for enhancing students' learning capacities, but also for giving them the skills and the knowledge that increasingly and globally employers are demanding from our students and the people that we coach and the people that we teach. So thank you very much for listening to this lecture. I will just leave you with some of the references that I've used throughout the presentation, which you can also go back and have a look at as you become more familiar and as you develop your blended learning strategies as well. And it's also effective when you are developing your blended learning strategies to also go back and become familiar with some of the academic literature and also to integrate that into your own experiences, into your own capacities for developing the blended learning. Once again, thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I hope it's given you some ideas and some motivation to develop blended learning, to integrate blended learning into your modules and programs, and to think more academically and pedagogically about how blended learning can assist you in developing more effective teaching and learning strategies. So thank you again for listening to this presentation.